I'm your host, Jimmy Chen. Arrgh. Hello. Woo. Welcome to my channel, Food for HNM. It's like food for thought. I am your host, Jimmy Chen. Jimmy Chen. Here at this channel, we discuss and read all things Holy Bible. We are in the book of 1 Kings, chapter 9. The next section is titled, The Lord Appears to Solomon. When Solomon had finished building the temple of the Lord and the royal palace and had achieved all he had desired to do, the Lord appeared to him a second time, as he had appeared to him at Gibeon. The Lord said to him, I have heard the prayer and plea. So a supplication is like a plea. It's cool. The Lord uses the word plea. And I understand the word plea more than supplication. You have made before me. I have consecrated this temple. So consecrated, remember, is when something is consecrated, it's only for God, the Lord. It's for his purposes. You can't do other things in there. It's like completely supposed to be for the Lord's activities and the Lord's prayers and like his purposes, like what he wants to accomplish on the earth, which you have built by putting my name there forever. My eyes and my heart will always be there. As for you, if you walk before me faithfully with integrity of heart and uprightness, as David your father did, and do all I command and observe my decrees and laws, I will establish your royal throne over Israel forever. So you remember, forever is for all time, like all time, not forever and ever. It could be forever and ever and ever if you're thinking about eternity, like maybe heaven. But remember, this Israel is ancient Israel. It is Israel from a long time ago. And the country Israel now is modern day Israel. It was started in 1949 or 1948. So they are two different Israels. So, this ancient Israel, they were like a group of people that were in the same area of the world, same land. But remember, sometimes the nation is the people, So King David and King Solomon, they will always be king over those certain people. They died and went to heaven already. So like, you know what I mean? Imagine that there were these people in the past. They lived in the past. There are a lot of them. And King David and King Solomon is the king right now. They will always be king over those people. So that's forever, forever over those people. But they're nice, so they're not, they're good kings, so the people liked him and wanted King Solomon to be their king. As I promised David, your father, when I said, you shall never fail to have a successor on the throne of Israel. But if you or your descendants turn away from me and do not observe the commands and decrees I have given you, and go off to serve other gods and worship them, then I will cut off Israel from the land I have given them, and will reject this temple I have consecrated for my name. Israel will then become a byword and an object of ridicule among all people. This temple will become a heap of rubble. All who pass by will be appalled and will scoff and say, "Why has the Lord done such a thing to this land and to this temple?" People will answer, "Because they have forsaken the Lord their God, who brought their ancestors out of Egypt, and have embraced other gods, worshiping and serving them. That is why the Lord brought all this disaster on them." The next section is titled Solomon's Other Activities. At the end of 20 years, during which Solomon built these two buildings, the temple of the Lord and the royal palace, King Solomon gave 20 towns in Galilee to Hiram, king of Tyre, because Hiram had supplied him with all the cedar and juniper and gold he wanted. But when Hiram went from Tyre to see the towns that Solomon had given him, he was not pleased with them. "What kind of towns are these you have given me, my brother?" he asked. And he called them the land of Kabul, a name they have to this day. Now Hiram had sent to the king 120 talents of gold. Here is the account of the forced labor King Solomon conscripted to build the Lord's temple, his own palace, the terraces, the wall of Jerusalem, and Hazor, Megiddo, and Gezer. Pharaoh, king of Egypt, had attacked and captured Gezer. He had set it on fire. He killed its Canaanite inhabitants, and then gave it as a wedding gift to his daughter, Solomon's wife. And Solomon rebuilt Gezer. He built up Lower Beth Horon, Baalath, and Tadmor in the desert within his land, as well as all his store cities and the towns for his chariots and for his horses. Whatever he desired to build in Jerusalem, in Lebanon, and throughout all the territory he ruled. There were still people left from the Amorites, Hittites, Perizzites, Hivites, and Jebusites. These people were not Israelites. Remember, there were 7 enemies of Israel. These 5 are among the 7. They are the enemies. Solomon conscripted the descendants of all these people remaining in the land, whom the Israelites could not exterminate, to serve as slave labor, as it is to this day. But Solomon did not make slaves of any of the Israelites. They were his fighting men, his government officials, his officers, his captains, and the commanders of his chariots and charioteers. They were also the chief officials in charge of Solomon's project. 550 officials supervising those who did the work. So Solomon is wise, For his people, he gave the better positions. After Pharaoh's daughter had come up from the city of David to the palace Solomon had built for her, he constructed the terraces. 3 times a year, Solomon sacrificed burnt offerings and fellowship offerings on the altar he had built for the Lord, burning incense before the Lord along with them, and so fulfilled the temple obligations. King Solomon also built ships at Ezion Geber, or it's not Gerber, like Gerber baby food. It's Ezion Geber, which is near Elath in Edom, on the shore of the Red Sea. So remember, there's the Red Sea and the Dead Sea. Dead Sea. The Dead Sea is in Israel. The Red Sea is further away from Israel. And Hiram sent his men, sailors who knew the sea, to serve in the fleet with Solomon's men. They sailed to Ophir and brought back 420 talents of gold, which they delivered to King Solomon. Let's keep going to chapter 10. First Kings chapter 10. The next section is titled The Queen of Sheba Visits Solomon. When the Queen of Sheba, or Sheba, it could be the Queen of Sheba. Sheba sounds cooler. Well, Sheba sounds good too. Heard about the fame of Solomon and his relationship to the Lord. She came to test Solomon with hard questions. Arriving at Jerusalem with a very great caravan with camels carrying spices, large quantities of gold and precious stones. She came to Solomon and talked with him about all that she had on her mind. So she came with camels. She probably had many camels, not the cigarettes. There are these animals that look funny. I had a bud, his face looked like a camel. But they're like a horse, and they have these lumpy things on their back. 2 of them, humps. And spices. And you wonder, Jimmy, why spices? Because a long time ago, spices were very expensive. Even like pepper, black pepper, very expensive. You could trade them for like silver and gold. Large quantities of gold and precious stones. So some of you might not know, what a diamond is, but there's like a green version of that called an emerald. And then there's a blue version, kind of like diamonds, but diamonds are the most expensive. But sometimes the emerald can be very expensive, very precious. The blue one is called a sapphire. And there's a red one called a ruby. Like that computer stuff. Ruby on rails. So she wanted to ask him questions, which sounds funny, Usually when you ask someone too many questions, you kind of like them. But he's married. Solomon answered all her questions. Nothing was too hard for the king to explain to her. When the queen of Sheba saw all the wisdom of Solomon. So remember, he's funny. Solomon likes to talk about poetry, tell stories, and he likes to talk about animals. If you watched my earlier video, that's included in the wisdom of Solomon. And then he has songs. He wrote many songs, and so he might sing. Remember the culture of that area. There's a lot of singing and dancing, so it's not unusual. And the palace he had built. Remember, he must have some kind of genius. If we saw his palace today, we would not be impressed. But back then, he really knew how to build a building. People probably saw his design. Like the building design. Like, oh, that's really cool. The food on his table. So, he probably had, you know what I mean? Like, someone could eat many courses, Like, every time he ate 50 dishes. But some food is fancier, So he probably always ate fancy food, The seating of his officials, the attending servants in their robes, his cupbearers, and the burnt offerings he made at the temple of the Lord. She was overwhelmed. She said to the king, "The report I heard in my own country about your achievements and your wisdom is true. But I did not believe these things until I came and saw with my own eyes. Indeed, not even half was told to me. In wisdom and wealth you have far exceeded the report I heard. How happy your people must be, how happy your officials who continually stand before you and hear your wisdom. Praise be to the Lord your God, who has delighted in you." So that's strange. In her language, she said, "Praise be to the Lord your God." That is, in Hebrew, it is Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu. You could say something like, "Thank God it's Friday," right? And then in Chinese, it's like, 感谢主今天是礼拜五. Hey, it rhymes. You know what I mean? It's like that. In her language, she said, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu. I don't know what language she spoke. Because of the Lord's eternal love for Israel, he has made you king to maintain justice and righteousness. And she gave the king 120 talents of gold, large quantities of spices and precious stones. Never again were so many spices brought in as those the queen of Sheba gave to King Solomon. Hiram's ships brought gold from Ophir, and from there they brought great cargoes of almug wood and precious stones. The king used the almug wood to make supports for the temple of the Lord and for the royal palace, and to make harps and lyres for the musicians. A lyre is kind of like a guitar. So much almug wood has never been imported or seen since that day. King Solomon gave the queen of Sheba all she desired and asked for. Besides what he had given her, out of his royal bounty. Then she left and returned with her retinue to her own country. So they traded. Like, remember, there's something like importing and exporting. There's something called like a trade deficit. So remember, like, let's pick a country like, I don't know, Korea, Korea, South Korea. So the United States, we want their Samsung phones, right? And then Netflix wants their K-dramas. And then they probably want like our auto parts, because they have Hyundai, and they have a lot of automobile brands, like makes. There's make and model, right? For a car, the make is like Ford, and the model is like Explorer. So they probably need our auto parts, and they probably need a lot of our like stuff like wheat, potatoes, because South Korea is a small country. They cannot grow like that much food, and they have to like store it too in case there's an emergency. So see, we trade, right? We trade stuff, the phones and the K-dramas for like auto parts and food. So that's what the Queen of Sheba probably did. Like, she brought, spices, gold, and stones, right? Not stones, come on. What I was talking about. Diamonds, emeralds, maybe sapphires and rubies. And then, I don't know what she asked for. She probably needed gold, wood. Wood from the tree. Wood. Okay. The next section is titled Solomon's Splendor. The weight of the gold that Solomon received yearly was 666 talents. So it's not necessarily a bad number. It's a gold number, not including the revenues from merchants and traders, and from all the Arabian kings and the governors of the territories. King Solomon made 200 large shields of hammered gold. 600 shekels of gold went into each shield. He also made 300 small shields of hammered gold, and 3 minas of gold in each shield. The king put them in the palace of the forest of Lebanon. Then the king made a great throne covered with ivory and overlaid with fine gold. The throne had 6 steps, and its back had a rounded top. On both sides of the seat were armrests, with a lion standing beside each of them. That's kind of Asian. 12 lions stood on the 6 steps, one at either end of each step. Nothing like it had ever been made for any other kingdom. That's true. I've done a lot of surfing around on Wikipedia and looked at like thrones. Some of them are kind of lame, if you believe it or not. We will never be able to enter a royal palace. Only really important people to that king. In Europe they still have kings, but that's called a throne room. I hate to sound, I mean, I don't have a throne room, but when you look at some of them, they seem more like going to court, like when you gotta visit your honor. It seems like it's more like a court, but there's like a big fancy chair there, or two. So all King Solomon's goblets, his cups, they're like these bigger cups for, drinking more, because when I mean, he's probably he's a big, a king is probably, usually kings are not small people, so don't pour him a small drink. And all the household articles in the palace of the forest of Lebanon were pure gold. Nothing was made of silver, because silver was considered of little value in Solomon's days. The king had a fleet of trading ships at sea, along with the ships of Hiram. Once every 3 years it returned, carrying gold, silver, and ivory, and apes and baboons. King Solomon was greater in riches and wisdom than all the other kings of the earth. So, he's super smart. So I think every time he went to battle other kings, he just whooped them really fast, because, smart. He has strategy, and, he just, you know what I'm saying. Sometimes if you're so smart, you could defeat another army with like a lot fewer, soldiers. But he's so rich, his weapons were probably like super lethal, The whole world sought audience with Solomon to hear the wisdom God had put in his heart. Year after year, everyone who came brought a gift, articles of silver and gold, robes, weapons, and spices, and horses and mules. Solomon accumulated chariots and horses. He had 1,400 chariots. It's like having 1,400 cars. But they're the best cars, like, Lamborghini, Bentley, Rolls Royce, maybe what do you call this, Jaguar, or Aston Martin. Is Aston Martin a car? And 12,000 horses, which he kept in the chariot cities, and also with him in Jerusalem. The king made silver as common in Jerusalem as stones, and cedar as plentiful as sycamore fig trees in the foothills. Solomon's horses were imported from Egypt and from Kue. That's Kue. Let's see where that is. It's Cilicia. Okay, let's look up Cilicia. Let's practice some good habits. Let's know what we're talking about. France, Cilicia. Okay, Google is telling me that it's a Roman name. Oh, it's Turkey. Turkey. The country Turkey. Not Gabba Gabba. Not Yo Gabba Gabba. Gabba Gabba. So his horses, he got them from Egypt and Turkey, the country Turkey. The royal merchants purchased them from Kuwait at the current price. They imported a chariot from Egypt for 600 shekels of silver, and a horse for 150. So that's what Egypt had. If you watch my earlier videos, when the Israelites were leaving with Moses and Aaron, and they had a sister, Miriam, they were the leaders. There's so many people leaving Egypt. The Pharaoh, he changed his mind. He let them go, and he changed his mind and chased after them. He had like so many soldiers and horses and chariots. So That's what Egypt has. Horses. And they knew how to make a chariot, like cars. You know what we know as automobiles, cars. So back then, this is a long time ago. You want a good car, it's the U.S. or like Japan or maybe Korea, you know. So back then, long time ago, thousands of years ago, you want a good chariot, you get it from Egypt. They also exported them to all the kings of the Hittites and of the Arameans. That's it. Thank you for joining me. I hope that was entertaining. You can always leave a comment and share my video, please. You know. Wait, did I look like an armpit smell? There you go. Okay, no, forget it. You know, you're cooler than I. Remember, keep God first. He'll take you places.